Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Radha Madhava ki jai. Hare Krishna. How are you? Good. How was your japa this morning? So thank you. Huh? Kishori Kunda. So- Oh, okay. So it's still waiting for me too. Good. We're on the same page. That it's good. So with your blessings, I would like to take your blessings to say today something relevant, something relatable, something that is in line with our Siddhanta. We're going to be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 26th chapter, verse 47. So we first chant. Namo guna visheshorto yasyatat shrotram uchyate vayor guna visheshorto yasyatat sparshanam vidu Namo guna visheshorto yasyatat shrotram uchyate vayor guna visheshorto yasyatat sparshanam vidu Namo guna visheshorto yasyatat shrotram uchyate vayor guna visheshorto yasyatat sparshanam vidu. Please chant. Namo guna visheshorto yasyatat shrotram uchyate vayor guna visheshorto yasyatat sparshanam vidu. Namo guna visheshorto Yasyatat Shrotram Uchyate Vayorguna Visheshorto Yasyatat Sparshanam Vidum Naboguna Visheshorto Yasyatat Shrotram Uchyate Vayorguna Visheshorto Yasyatat Sparshanam Vidum Naboguna Visheshorto Yasyatat Shrotram Uchyate Vayorguna Visheshorto Yasyatat Sparshanam Vidum. So we go word for word. Nabha Guna Vishesham. The distinctive characteristic of sky, sound. Characteristic of sky, which is sound. Yeah. Artha, object of perception. Yasya, whose. Tat, that. Shrotram, the auditory sense. Uchyate is called. Vayoguna Vishesha, the distinctive characteristic of air, which is touch. Artha, object of perception. Yasya, whose. Tat, that. Sparshanam, the tactile sense. Vidhu, they know. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The sense whose object of perception is sound is called the auditory sense, and that whose object of perception is touch is called the tactile sense. Purport: sound is one of the qualifications of the sky and is the subject matter for hearing. Similarly, touch is the qualification of the ear and is the subject of the touch sensation. So chant verse again. Naboguna visheshorto yasyatach shrotram uchyate vayorguna visheshorto yasyatat sparshanam vidu. The sense whose object of perception is sound is called the auditory sense, and that whose object of perception is touch is called the tactile sense. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Shalakayam Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtatya Shatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are in these verses looking like microscopically at some of the material elements, and we are looking I'm just reading 12th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the dissolution of the material world is explained. So the contra process of what we're hearing right now from Lord Kapila Dev. And I just read this beautiful verse which says that this material ingredients, they're like a thread in a cloth of material existence. And now we are observing in detail, discussing these threads that are visible in the cloth, but the cloth itself, it's a final product. And I was thinking of this when you're weaving a sweater. So, and then you go first line, and then you turn around, you make a second line, and it goes like this till you have the whole sweater. And this is the amalgamation of the material world. And it always adds up. You start with the most subtle element, which is sky, and which is the cause of the sound. Here it says that, it's the cause of the sound, and then when you add another one, you have the sound. When you add a little less subtle element, which is air, you have the sound already, but then, because you wove the two lines already, you have the sound, and then you add the touch. And then when you go further, you just add the material elements, and when the dissolution comes, you take the thread out. And so what we can see from it is that it is relative, because one is the cause of the other, but you can only think about the cause when you look at the effect. And that means it's relative. It has a beginning and an end. You started weaving, you finished, and then you tear it apart. So it had a beginning and an end, and which means it is real, but it is not the essence. So the essence is the underlying principle behind the thread, not the thread itself, because the thread is the conglomerate of the material ingredients, but the essence behind it, the secret hand that is weaving the sweater or tearing it apart. So when I was preparing for the lecture today, it has a very short purport, as you've noticed. When I was preparing, I heard a lecture that Srila Prabhupada gave on this particular verse, and I was thinking whether I should speak about the auditory sense, about the hearing, or whether I should speak about the tactile sense, about the touch. Both I could speak about, but Srila Prabhupada only spoke about the auditory sense, only spoke about the hearing, so I'm going to do the same thing. And I have a question for you to start with. In our daily practice, which activities are we performing where hearing is predominant, where there's a focus on hearing? Japa, Kirtan, lecture. In Harinam, that's true. It's something, yeah. If you read loudly, even if you read quietly. I don't know about you, but when I read, my tongue actually moves, and I hear the words in my head while I read. I don't know, I know you have all sorts of techniques of reading. You can read diagonally, and just and you read really fast. I don't read fast, and I read speaking pace, because I'm hearing the words. So yeah, how about when a devotee is speaking to us in confidentiality? Is the hearing the most important thing in that? Also, yeah. So we see that there are a lot of activities in our daily practice where hearing is very, very important. And we often say, we use this definition that giving oral reception. And hearing is actually, it's a lot more than just giving oral reception. I remember when I was a student at the university, I was studying speech and language pathology. And I was specializing in in treating different kinds of special need groups, children that have special needs like autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, and also one group being children that are deaf and hard of hearing. And I worked a lot with children like that as well. And I remember at college, we were told that because these children usually, when they are 1 year old, they would get a cochlear implant, which is an implant. You can say, yeah, like it's called cochlear because of the shape of the inside of the ear. So it's an implant. They get like a magnet inside their skull, and you have an outer part which has a sound magnifier, and there's a software inside which you can have a written program which based on specific needs of that child, which frequencies should be augmented, which frequencies should be a little bit diminished, like this. And so we often heard at college that the kids, they're hearing, but the question is, are they really listening? So, and then in this sense, hearing being the mechanical process, and listening being a mental, a psychological process of understanding what is being said. And I observe especially bigger children in school, often if there was too much of an auditory input for them, they would switch it off. So no more math for me, thank you. They will remain in silence for the rest of the hour. So yeah, and then when I started practicing, when I met the devotees, I started practicing Bhakti Yoga, started chanting. They told me, yes, we're listening, but are we really hearing? And I was a bit bewildered by it. It took me some time to have to understand how this goes. When we were saying you're hearing, you're not really listening. Now they're saying you're listening, but you're not really hearing. So yeah, today I'm gonna try to have these two ends meet, try to explain the one and the other. So there are two platforms of sound transmission. One being material platform, and the other being spiritual platform. Now, on the material platform, you have two sets of sounds. One is meaningless sound, like if I do, it doesn't mean anything. At least not in English. It might mean something in tribal African, but I wouldn't know that, so for me it doesn't mean anything, it's meaningless. Then you have meaningful sounds. If I say a harmonium or a book, everybody who speaks English and who knows this object would, even if the object were not present before us, you would connect, you would understand the meaning. So, yes, and then in the lecture I heard by Srila Prabhupada, he was saying that simply if we chant the name of material sound, then you do not get the essence. If we take the meaningful sound and you say something like water, and you chant like water, water, it does not quench your thirst. So that's a description, one of the nature of the material sound. On the other hand, we said we have a spiritual platform on which the spiritual sound is transmitted, and the sound of that platform is mantra. Narottam Das Thakur says, Golokera Prema Dhamma Harinama Sankirtanam. He actually says that this sound, the mantra, it is not from the sky. It is from the sky beyond. It is not material, meaning it is spiritual. And unlike material sound, spiritual sound is Satchitananda. It is eternal. Mantra is eternal. Mantra is full of knowledge. And mantra is blissful. It's also Vigraha, it also has a form. But yeah. So yeah, in this lecture, Prabhupada is saying how spiritual sound is actually uplifting, unlike material sound. You can hear it over and over and over again, and we see ourselves, we're chanting the holy names of the Lord over and over, years in and years out. We never get tired of it. And he's also saying that by taking shelter of the mantra, you can enter into the spiritual world. Because the name of Krishna is Chintamani. It's transcendental. Now, to understand that, I'm gonna mention Bhakti Vigyan Goswami. Maybe you know him. He is an initiating guru in our movement, a sannyasi from Russia, very learned. And I like hearing from him here and there. His lectures are very systematic and very into depth. And I just heard a speech from him where he was explaining, because when he was a young devotee, he was a postgraduate student in Russia. And of course, devotees were propagating Krishna consciousness, but at that time in Russia, it was very dangerous and difficult, any kind of religious expression, especially in the public sphere. So the KGB would prosecute them, would capture them, would interrogate them. Many of them were even put in prison or concentration camps. I read a book, forgot how it's called, but the title is something about breadcrumbs. Yes, salty bread, because that's what they were eating, no? Salty bread they were eating. And from the breadcrumbs they were making their japa, so they could chant. So anyway, they captured Bhaktivedanta Goswami as well, the KGB. And as he was going to this interrogation room, he was petrified. He was scared because this agent, they had the power to decide whether or not the person lives or dies, ultimately. They could, let him go or send him to the concentration camp, which definitely would, mean the end of him. So he was very scared, and he was saying that this KGB agent, he was like, sitting all day, I'm the power personified, smiling and like this, asking him questions. And as he was answering, something very magical and mystical happened. And this exact words Maharaj used was, a mantra descended upon me. It was not like he made some effort to chant it. It's not like he was praying or anything, calling out for Krishna. A mantra descended upon him. The only thing he was doing was he was hearing. And he said, at that moment, I was able to zoom out from the situation in which I was. Jai Shri Lakshmi Prabhat Narasimha Deva Ki Jai. He zoomed out from the situation in which he was, and he found how insignificant this person sitting next to him actually was, and how unimportant these events, on the grand scale are. And he felt peaceful and serene and happy, and he started smiling. And then this agent was bewildered, what happened, what's going on? So I remember, it's like 10 or more years ago, when I first read the Bhagavad Gita, I was not a practicing devotee, but I got the book and I read it. And I remember what I understood about chanting from the Gita was exactly this thing. I understood that, you chant the mantra repeatedly, you chant, until it is not you who is chanting anymore. It's not you chanting the mantra, but the mantra is chanting you. Now, at that time, it might be just word jugglery or a little bit of, philosophical understanding. But later on, some years later, I actually started practicing and chanting. And I have, and I bet all of you have this experience, actually. Either being japa, either being kirtan, either being just listening to somebody else chant. That it's like, I remember many instances in my life when I would sit in kirtan and I would, sing, obviously, but there would be sound around me, the mantra, and it would go through my body and all, and it didn't feel like I'm the one, moving my lips and saying these words. It just felt like I'm bathing in the holy name, in the sound. And I don't chant like this on the daily basis. I wish I did. But Krishna gives us these drops of nectar, these experiences, just so that we know what's awaiting for us once we're pure, once we get to the stage of pure chanting. Now, how to get to the stage of pure chanting? Does anybody has an idea? There is, when I was initiated, Guru Maharaj made us memorize the 10 offenses to the holy name. And many of my god sisters, god brothers, he would ask to recite those 10 offenses as well. And most of the initiating lectures Bhakti Swami gave were on the topic of the 10 offenses. And he said this is the most important thing you have to work on. So I have them written down so that we don't forget anything, but would you like to try to name a few, and then whatever we leave out, I'm reading. True. It also says that if you're thinking that the names of demigods are equal or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu, I think that's the one, yeah. To believe that it is an imagination, yeah, the glories of the holy name, they're just, something imagined. What we just spoke about, it's a bit esoteric, no? If you just hear it and you don't have experience as chanting, somebody said the mantra is chanting you with the sense upon. It's like, what? Yeah, but because we have experience of this, then we can talk about it. It's our reality, our shared reality. So true to think that it's imagination. Also, to blaspheme two things: the devotees, yes, and the scriptures. That's also the offense to the holy name, to blaspheme the devotees, to blaspheme the scriptures. When we have a guru, what's the most important thing? To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. Yes, on the strength of the holy name. That's true. If you do something sinful, it's sinful, and you think, I'm just going to chant some rounds, it's going to nullify whatever. It's not. It's an offense against the holy name. It doesn't work like that as well. One is also to interpret it, to try to interpret the holy name out of your own mental speculation. So, then one is to consider chanting of the holy name to be one of the karma kanda rituals, that you can, derive some fruits out of your chanting. Okay, to instruct, who should we not instruct about the chanting? Who don't want to hear her faithless, yes. So that's also an offense, to instruct a faithless person. And then what do we have to have if we want to chant and we want proper results of our chanting? What do we really have to approach chanting even? We have to have faith. Yes, complete faith in the holy name, and we have to be free from material attachment as well. Work on it. And then there's an additional one, yes, which is the most tricky one. It's to chant inattentively. And now we can say, okay, this is what I have to do. Every time I grab a beat, I make an offense. So, but actually, to get to the stage of pure chanting, the only thing we can do actually is to chant. So because chanting itself, it cleans up our consciousness. By chanting, we are getting free from the illusion of thinking that we are something of this material world. It's Cheto Darpana Marjanam. It's cleansing out our hearts. And by chanting slowly, slowly, and gradually, we are becoming qualitatively one with Krishna. So in Nectar of Devotion, it is said that when you chant, then slowly first you realize the Lord's name, then you realize the Lord's form, then you realize the Lord's qualities, and then the Lord's pastimes. That this is how it gradually goes. And to illustrate this, in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a chapter called Gopis are glorifying the song of Krishna's flute. And it is really, such beautiful descriptions are there. It's how Krishna with his brother, his big brother and his cowherd boyfriends, they enter into Vrindavan forest. And there are breezes that are carrying around the aroma of the lotus flowers. And the atmosphere is filled with buzzing of the bees. And there are flocks of birds chirping. And then Krishna would sit down on the pasturing grounds, he would herd his cows, and he would start playing the flute. And then gopis, far away in the village, would hear, his song. And immediately they would embrace each other when they would hear Krishna play the flute. And they would see him. They would have this realization. By hearing, they just saw his form. They say, oh, he's so charmingly dressed. He has this white, yellow silk garments, and he has peacock feathers, and he has a garland of lotuses, and there's lilies. He's decorated with mango sprouts and flower buds, and they would be totally mesmerized by the form they just saw by hearing his flute. And then other devotees, they would start to praise his qualities, and they would start to speak about his pastimes, and they would be jealous of the flute. They'd say, oh, this flute is so extremely fortunate. He's close to Krishna's lips all the time when he's playing. The forefathers of the flute, the bamboo trees that are growing, they are shedding tears of pleasure when they're hearing this, And the mother of the flute, which is the river bank of the Yamuna, she's totally jubilant. And there are open lotus flowers on the river. They look like, that their hair is standing on end. And they also mentioned how the peacocks, they would come, they would surround Krishna, and they would dance madly to the sound of his flute. And then in gratitude, because Krishna is playing for them, they would offer their feathers. And then Krishna, of course, accepted this offering. He would put it in his hair. And then the deers and the doe, they would come. When they hear the sound, they would immediately come. They would go on the hilltops, and they would be stunned. They would just look at the scenery. And demigods and demigoddesses, they would go in their airplanes. They would pass by, and they would look down and, enjoy the scenery. So, if we want a little bit of that, the only thing for us actually to do is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommended, which is Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam, kalaunasti eva nasti eva gatir anyataha. This verse is found in Chaitanya Charitamrita and Madhya Lila, chapter 6, 200, verse 242, and it translates that in this age of hypocrisy and quarrel, in this age, I'm just reading now in the 12th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where our minds are horribly disturbed all the time. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying that the only means of deliverance from the clutches of the material existence is to chant the holy names of Lord Sri Hari. There is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. So here I'll stop my presentation, and I invite you, if you have something to add or to share some of your realizations, or please do. I'll pass you the microphone.
Ja, also ich muss sagen, was du gesagt hast, ist mir so gegenwärtig, wenn man seine Erfahrung selber gemacht hat. Und ich war mal im Bhubaneswar und wollte frühmorgens zur Mangal Arati gehen. Es war noch schummrig, also richtig dunkel ja nicht, und es war eine Totenstille so auf den Straßen. Und dann hatte ich so ein Erlebnis, dass ich verfolgt wurde und da geht einer hinter mir und dann rennt er auf mich zu, dann drehe ich mich um und rufe dann ganz schnell Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Auf einmal ist neben mir eine Karawane von Fahrzeugen, ein hell erleuchteter Bus. Also Krishna hat sofort in einer Sekunde alles manifestiert da, wo vorher eine Totenstille war. Also es ist untypisch, dass die Gegend da so ruhig ist. Es war so ein bisschen Wildnis bis zum Tempel. Und es war kein Hund, keine Maus, keine Katze, keine Kuh, es war nichts da. Es war die Straße, man hatte eine Straßeneinsicht in jede Richtung bis ungefähr so 200 Meter und da war nichts. Und auf einmal innerhalb von einer Sekunde hat Krishna alles. Also da kann man sehen, was für eine Wirkung der Name hat. Und dann hatte ich noch mal ein Erlebnis hier. Ach so, ja. Entschuldigung.
In welchem indischen Stadt war das nochmal?
Bhubaneswar.
Okay. So she was in India once in Bhubaneswara. How? Bhubaneswara. I don't know this. And actually she was in the early morning before Mangalarati on the way to the temple, and I was like pretty wild, this area, and completely dark and a little dusty, foggy, and she was completely alone on the streets, and so she felt something is behind her and she is followed by someone, and so she also turned back and saw that like a man is following her, and she was really scared, and then she was like, Krishna, 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 and in this moment somehow she says like Krishna manifested out of this silence and darkness. There was a bus coming with a light and a caravan with different cars and people. So she just said Krishna, Krishna, and in this second all the people appeared, and she was somehow safe because she could walk then with all the people to temple for Mangalarati.
Ja, und ich drehe mich um und der Kerl ist weg.
Yeah.
Ich drehe mich wieder um, Karawane weg, alles wieder weg.
So she when this caravan comes, she turns back and she's like, oh, this man is gone. And then she turns again, and then the caravan is gone, but the man also disappeared. And then she was alone again, walking again to temple.
Und dann hatte ich hier mal ein Erlebnis in Passau, hatten wir Harinam gemacht und ich habe so ein paar Bücher verteilt und da kam eine Dame auf mich zu und sagte, ach, sind die von Prabhupada, die Bücher? Ich sage, ja. Sagt sie, der heilige Name, der hat ja so eine Wirkung. Ich komme gerade von einer Beerdigung meines Mannes und ich war so traurig und dann habe ich geschändet und jetzt geht es mir richtig gut. Ja, also, und das war eine Mataji, die gar keinen Kontakt so weiter hatte. Die war auch noch nicht im Tempel, die hat da bloß die Bücher gelesen, vor allen Dingen das Chant und Sei Happy und hat so die Erfahrung gemacht und hat dadurch einen ganz strikten Glauben bekommen. War so erfreut darüber, über diese Wirkung, dass ihr damit so gut geht.
And another experience she made recently was in Passau when she was distributing books. There was like an older lady coming to her and she was like, hey, are these the books of Srila Prabhupada? And Kishori said, yes, they are. And she said, you know, today is actually such a sad day for me. I just come from the funeral of my dear husband and I was so sad, and then I just chanted the holy name and I felt the power and the mercy, and Kishori asked this woman, where does she know from? And she said, oh, I only read once a book, like Chant and Be Happy, and that's it. She does not have like any contact to temple or devotees. And this was like, so Kishori said she was really impressed by the power of the holy name, how it also comes to people you actually think they have no idea about Krishna consciousness.
So, jetzt gucke ich wieder. Warte, ich gehe.
Sorry, amazing stories. I think I lost a little bit of my trail, but I was just reflecting when you spoke very nice of this part in Srimad Bhagavatam. I think it's like the Venu Gita, like this element or somewhere near this part, because I only know because I re-listened to my initiation lecture, and Satchidananda Swami relates my name Gopi Gita to the Venu Gita, and that I should often read this pastime that you described. So it was very nice to hear it, because actually over the years I don't read it enough, and one part of reading and then hearing is that where one is then captured into that place and time of Krishna with his flute, the gopis. You're raptured. Yeah, it's really a very sweet element that sometimes when caught in the material dealings, it's like, some sort of dream almost. Yeah? But in a moment when we allow ourselves to be captured in this pastime, especially as you narrated it, just how it's from in the Srimad Bhagavatam, one is carried away to a higher dimension, a spiritual dimension. And in my last weeks or so, I really meditate on this element that sometimes I think spiritual life is difficult because we try to tackle all these inner demons or other issues that come up. And don't get me wrong, of course one has to. But on the other side, it's very important to hear deeply these sort of leelas and these stories to understand that actually the spiritual plane is very different to our experience here. And that's the important, and that was very nice to be reminded of this leela. That was the first part. The second part I wanted to ask was, it was a very interesting lecture and verse that you got as a speech, can one say speech therapist? Like a speech therapist yourself, and also, having learned different levels of hearing and what people hear and how to develop. Did you find in your because you've done the work more deep, that some elements also help one in spiritual life? Like in terms of this sort of hearing, or does it make one more attentive, or can one apply it? What's the word? A bit, brain dead, but a bit, what's the word when you learn something and you can apply it even if it's not directly? Like, like Prabhupada said, you can have these technical things, maybe computer, but you use it in Krishna service somehow. It's like a part. Do you sometimes come across a devotee and you remember, it's just because they haven't heard it or they understand it differently or something like this? You look at a bit of me at the blank, so I'm sorry that I threw that on you. But it just wondered if there are some parts where you can apply over.
Everybody, when we start chanting, we have to learn to chant. But I don't know, my experience when I started chant, it was totally blissful. And a lot of my bad habits just went away, just because I chanted. I was starting to gone from my life, and so far, for good. So, but you were asking specifically, with the hearing part. Yes, I think that depends on the nature of your mind. Because I can answer. I heard a lecture by Bhaktivinoda Goswami again. He was explaining what the commentators of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras said about the second sutra, which is a definition of yoga itself. And that there are 5 different levels of how the mind operates. And the first one being that the mind is distracted, which is most of the time, at least for me. So from that part, even if I'm philosophically understanding many things, and if the mind is wandering, it's difficult to bring it back for anybody. And then the second one being that the mind is in the mode of ignorance. You're like, it's okay, or whatever. I don't know what's the English expression for it. Maybe. The third one, that the mind is in the mode of passion, that wants something, always making plans. So, and these three stages, phases, or whatever, of mind are actually not conducive for meditation. In either one of these three, you cannot actually meditate. We cannot actually hear. I remember when I was studying Bhakti Shastri, I had these neighbors. I was living in the Nrisimha building in the Grihastha area in Mayapur, and I had these neighbors, very sweet elderly couple, disciples of Srila Prabhupada. The husband was Purujit Prabhu, that was his name, and he was chanting a lot, and I would often see him when I would go to put my laundry to dry on the rooftop. He would be chanting there, and sometimes I would ask him, because he would be facing directly the sun and chanting, like, "You're sun gazing," and one day he told me, I'm gazing at my mind." And can you imagine somebody who's been chanting 40 years every day, who's chanting minimum 64 rounds a day, would give me an answer. It's a humble answer, I know. But humble is good. Humble is really good. So, yeah, there are two stages of the mind that are conducive for meditation, and this is the mind in Sattva Gun, and when the mind is Nishta. This is the uttermost. It's a stage of Samadhi, actually, the Nishta stage. But, we should make a conscious endeavor to get to the Sattva Guna stage, but just, to understand it, because we're trying to, we're so used to being distracted or being, or lamenting or planning something all the time. The mind is, constantly doing this, that we do not understand the Sattva Gun, The moment when we're peaceful and serene, we think that something's wrong. What's wrong? Yeah, it's boring also. And he's saying also that we should attach some emotions, because we're used to when we lament, there are, some negative emotions. When we're planning something, there's some, we're fired up, there's some, emotions like this. But then he said the emotion of Sattva Gun is gratitude. So we should try, pray for. I think pray for is the best thing, at least for me. Pray for that we can be satisfied being peaceful, and that we could feel gratitude, because that's all we have. It says in Srimad Bhagavatam, we are internally in debt to our material parents for giving us this body that in which we have the opportunity to advance spiritually, further advance spiritually. And we are eternally in debt to our gurus and to Srila Prabhupada and to Krishna ultimately. And gratitude, it's if you just zoom out, if we zoom out our daily problems and occupations, then we can see there's a lot to be grateful for. So I went around a little bit. I hope I answered also. So, if somebody else wants to add a drop of their nectar.
Da habe ich Guru gefragt, weil immer wenn ich in eine Stadt ging, dann war so ein Verkehr und Lärm und dies und das. Und dann habe ich gesagt, Guru, wenn ich in eine Stadt gehe, dann habe ich ans Krishna zu vergessen. Und da sagt er, na dann setzt dir einfach Kopfhörer auf, dann gehst du mit Kopfhörern in die Stadt. Dann bin ich immer mit Kopfhörern in die Stadt gegangen. Und das war dann schön. Da war mir Krishna wirklich immer nah, und ich hatte eine ganz andere innere Einstellung und immer eine Freude, eine Sicherheit dabei. Ja.
So she was just quickly explaining an experience like 15 years ago, because she said to her Guru Maharaj, Guru, I am afraid to go to town because there's so many noises, so much traffic, so much going on. And if I go to city, I'm afraid I will forget Krishna. So her Guru Maharaj, she said, just put some headphones. And then you don't listen to all of this. You don't hear all of these sounds. And this is what she did. And she said, then from this day on, I always went to city with my big, headphones. And but this changed my whole inner attitude, she said.
Okay, so thank you very much for being here, for bearing with me. We are going on a vacation Saturday, and 1 month we'll be away from the Holy Dham. This is the longest, since we came. And we'll be in association with devotees and wherever we go there. But we'll be missing you, and please pray for us that we come back, that we manage to find our way back to home, to the lotus feet of Lord Nrsimhadev. So, Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha, kripa sindhubhya evacha, patitanam pavanebhyo, vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Grantarat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, thank you.